Welcome, Command Personnel. I'm your briefing officer. Look, as high-level Foundation security, you are more than used to dealing with world-ending anomalies before your morning coffee, right? But the data we're reviewing in today's explainer, well, it completely recontextualizes one of our highest priority targets. So let's jump straight into the post-incident briefing for SCP-4290. We have a lot of ground to cover in this tactical debrief. We'll be looking at the eschatological threat, anatomy of the SEAL, our failed containment protocols, the resulting panic and defection, Scenario 4290 unlock, and finally, the autopsy and reclassification.
All right, moving right along to Section 1, the eschatological threat. We need to define the apocalyptic scope of what we were dealing with here.
SCP-4290 was officially designated a Class I eschatological entity. And you know the drill, that classification is strictly reserved for the absolute top-tier, reality-ending threats. We are talking a disruption class of Amida and a risk class of critical. The baseline working theory was basically this: if 4290 ever breached, human civilization and potentially reality as we observe it would just be gone. Poof.
Now, the historical context we pulled from the anomalous archives of SCP-1726 called this thing the Child, and the lore is incredibly grim. The translated texts say it rose its 10 mouths to the heavens, stretched wide 20 arms, and just poured out torrents of darkness and dead geometries. It supposedly drowned an entire landmass, and for 10 straight days drank the melted remains of every single soul on that island, making the whole world shake. This terrifying ancient history, that was the exact baseline that informed our entire containment strategy.
So let's look at Section 2, Anatomy of the SEAL, the 10 Millennia Lock.
See, we didn't actually build the cage for this monster, we just inherited it. The SEAL itself, designated SCP-4290-Lock, was sitting about 33 meters deep down in China's Qinghai Lake. Honestly, it was a masterpiece of ancient thaumetry. Picture this: 8 beryllium bronze totems shaped like heavily armored humans, completely covered in intricate networks of banishing runes. They were laid out in a massive 20-meter-wide fractal pattern right on the lakebed. For as long as we've monitored it, the center pulsed with this volatile red light. But about a month before the incident, that light started getting a lot brighter and a lot faster.
It turns out we were just the latest caretakers in a very, very long chain. This lock was initially set 10,000 years ago. Since then, you had the Arikashans, the Zhao dynasty, the ancient Orothons, and finally the Dyavites around the year 270. They all had to do these incredibly complex, bloody sacrificial rituals to carve new runes and patch up the failing lock. Come 2022, it was our turn.
Which brings us squarely to Section 3, Failed Containment Protocols, or the 2022 Crisis.
Things went from let's monitor this to absolute nightmare in early August. Anomalous TV broadcasts suddenly hijacked the local airwaves, showing the entity hovering over a melting city, and this creepy voice starts demanding we repair the child's locks. So the Department of Occult Containment goes into overdrive and scrambles a massive operation. We are talking hyper-specific anomalous rituals here. We literally deployed a submersible packed with 3 human cadavers and a live beating angel's heart to satiate the thing. At the exact same time, we sent down ROVs equipped to carve fresh, banishing runes right into the ancient totems. But it was a total disaster. Right in the middle of the rite, the lock violently spits out this massive surge of red light, searing heat, and lethal gamma radiation. The blast completely fries our ROVs, causing them to basically crash into and ruin the ancient runes that were already there. Because the ritual got botched, only 2 of the cadavers and half of the angel's heart actually vanished. And to make matters worse, later that day, the TV broadcast comes back with a chilling update. The sacrifice did not reach the 10 maws. Brace.
Naturally, this leads us to Section 4, Panic and Defection. The psychological collapse of our personnel.
I mean, try to imagine being on the ground for this. The lock is breaking, the runes are busted, and the literal end of the world is projected to happen in 7 days. Morale at the site completely collapsed. Agent Zenobia Morinos left a note that pretty much captures the pure terror they were feeling. She wrote, "Do we think we can actually stop this? The sacrifices won't work anymore. Once that seal breaks, we'll have a world of molten darkness." Right after leaving that note, she and several other operatives just broke. They completely abandoned their posts and defected, fleeing through extra-dimensional ways.
But Command, we don't have the luxury of panicking. We escalated. We deployed the absolute heavy hitters to the site. Mobile Task Forces Alpha 1, the cybernetic operatives of Tau 5 Samsara, and the heavy mechanized infantry of Nu 7. We kitted them out with experimental paratech weaponry. We laid down massive grids of nuclear mines around the entire perimeter. We even primed the Dagger's Break orbital strike system. We were quite literally preparing to scorch the Earth to contain this breach.
This takes us right to the brink. Section 5, Scenario 4290, Unlock, the final countdown. August 17th hits, and the grim countdown reaches 0. Seismometers go crazy with dimensional distortions, the beryllium bronze totems completely disintegrate into the lakebed, and Scenario 4290 Unlock officially begins. 10 minutes later, a 40-meter-long, incredibly emaciated humanoid titan just phases right out of the ground and flops onto the seabed. Command issues an immediate order to all MTF units: hold your fire. Do not engage until it makes a hostile move. The tension was, well, absolute. We waited. And we kept waiting. An hour goes by, then 2, then 3, just deafening silence. Our sensors are aggressively scanning for anything, but we register absolutely 0 thermic radiation, no psi wave emissions, no heartbeat. When we finally nudged the remaining ROVs in closer, we saw those leftover sacrificial corpses, the ones the TV broadcast was so worried about, just resting totally untouched right on its 10 mouths. There were no life functions whatsoever. Which leads us to the final part of our debrief, Section 6, Autopsy and Reclassification, the reality of the void. We sent the expeditionary crews in, fully suited up in Lambda model thermatohazard gear, to manually assess the remains. And Command, this is the kicker. The on-site autopsies proved the impossible. This apocalyptic, world-ending titan that supposedly drank the melted souls of an entire island, it hadn't just died recently. It had been dead for approximately 9,000 years. The cause of death? Simple malnutrition. It turns out that original 10,000-year-old lock was so absolute, so incredibly unyielding, that it completely cut the entity off from whatever anomalous energies it needed to sustain itself. So it literally just starved to death. It starved millennia before the Davites ever made their blood sacrifices, millennia before those creepy TV broadcasts demanded our intervention, and millennia before the Foundation even existed. So obviously our threat assessment has been completely overhauled. SCP-4290 went from reality-ending Cater-class Meta-level disruption threat straight to neutralized. Think about that for a second. The hyper-specific rituals, the nukes, the orbital strikes, the highly trained agents who lost their minds and ran, all of it was deployed against the 9,000-year-old corpse. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a profound question that really cuts to the core of our operational philosophy. In our relentless mission to secure and contain, are we sometimes sacrificing our sanity, our people, and our vast resources to guard against the phantoms of ancient history, rather than the actual realities of the present? The lock held, Command. It held so incredibly well that the monster died in the dark, long before we ever took the watch. Thank you for your attention to this briefing. Stay sharp out there. This concludes today's briefing. If you wish to maintain your current clearance level and ensure continued access to the Versarian database, a subscription to this channel is mandatory. Secure your connection by leaving a like on this file, and log your requests in the comments section below to dictate which anomaly we unseal next. Stay vigilant and expect your next set of logs every day. Secure, contain, protect.